a quiet archive record. Tonight, we're stepping into a slow unfolding. Settle in. Let the outside world dissolve and gently descend into tonight's world. In this account, we follow the first days and years after a verified first contact with a non-human civilization. We track the first public signals, the rush to confirm what is real, and the careful steps taken by governments, scientists, and ordinary people trying to stay grounded. We watch what happens to markets and supply chains, to borders and alliances, to the internet and the media, to faith and identity, and to the quiet routines of daily life. We move step by step through the diplomatic choices, the security fears, the scientific work, and the slow psychological settling that follows when humanity realizes it is not alone. Tonight, we explore first contact, step by step, aftermath. The first thing that changes is not the sky, it is the calendar. Before contact, the world is full of competing headlines. Elections, wars, prices, storms, scandals. After contact, those things continue, but they begin to orbit a new center of gravity. People mark time as before and after. Businesses rewrite plans. Governments shift priorities. Families argue, then agree, then argue again, all while a quiet new fact sits in the background of every day. In this story, the contact is not a single blurry clip or a rumor from a base. It is confirmed by many independent systems. A structured signal is detected by multiple radio observatories on different continents. It arrives with a timing and frequency drift that matches a source beyond Earth. The signal carries a repeating pattern that cannot be explained as random noise. Several teams, working separately, reproduce the detection and publish their methodology. At the same time, an object is tracked entering the upper atmosphere along a path announced in advance. It is observed by civilian cameras, tracked by radar, and captured by satellites. The data is messy, but it is consistent. It is enough for rivals to confirm without trusting each other. The contact is also limited. There is no immediate invasion, no sudden cure for disease, no instant leap into a shining future. There is a message, and there is a demonstration of capability. Then there is waiting. And it is in that waiting that the true aftermath begins. Hour 1 begins with noise. Screens fill with posts. Clips spread faster than context. In the first minutes, some people assume it is a hoax. Others assume it is the end. A few assume it is a secret human program. Then the first corrections and clarifications appear, and the story begins to harden into something that cannot be ignored. Within the first hour, the largest social platforms activate crisis response modes. They label unverified content, throttle obvious scams, and route users toward official feeds. But there is no full control. Private chats and encrypted groups fill with screenshots, home-recorded reactions, prayers, jokes, and fear. The speed of emotion is faster than the speed of institutions. In the first 6 hours, 2 kinds of people become very busy. The first are verifiers. Scientists, engineers, journalists with good sources, analysts in defense agencies, satellite tracking hobbyists, and the quiet technicians who run radar networks and telescope arrays. They compare timestamps. They match star fields. They verify that a claimed recording time matches the sky. They cross-reference public satellite passes to rule out common objects. They look for signs of editing. They examine compression artifacts. They hunt for inconsistencies. Many of them do not trust governments, but they trust physics, and physics, in this case, does not let them dismiss it. The second are stabilizers, central bank teams, emergency managers, hospital administrators, police chiefs, grid operators, water treatment supervisors. The people who keep critical systems running even when the world is shouting. Their job is not to answer what the visitors want. Their job is to keep the lights on, the water clean, and the shelves stocked. Because even if the contact is peaceful, panic can still break a society. By hour 12, small runs on supplies begin in some cities, not everywhere, but enough that footage of empty shelves spreads and triggers more runs. The first items to vanish are predictable: bottled water, batteries, shelf-stable food, certain medicines. Then fuel lines appear in a few places. The problem is not that the world lacks goods. The problem is that crowds move in bursts. A supply chain designed for steady demand struggles with sudden spikes. Stores respond by limiting purchases. Governments respond by reassuring the public that ports are open and trucks are moving. Some people are reassured, some are not. Rumors begin to move like sparks. There are always rumors. One says there will be martial law. Another says the internet will be shut down. Another says banks will freeze accounts. Another says the visitors are here to take children. Another says it is all a psychological operation. The stabilizers answer rumors with routine. They keep transit running. They keep markets open. They keep the same garbage pickup schedule if they can. They hold press conferences at fixed times, even when they have little new to say. They put the same officials on camera again and again, because familiar faces reduce fear. By the end of day one, stock markets swing hard. Defense and aerospace stocks spike. Cybersecurity spikes. Gold spikes. Some currencies wobble. Airlines drop. Luxury drops. Advertising drops. Circuit breakers pause trading multiple times. The pauses are described as normal safety systems. But everyone knows they are happening because the world has changed. Day two is when the words become official. A coalition of major governments holds a coordinated briefing. Their language is careful. They avoid words that trigger myth. They use phrases like non-human intelligence and non-terrestrial signal. They confirm the data and the process. They outline what is known and what is not. They announce the formation of a joint scientific and diplomatic panel. They also make a promise: regular updates. Even if updates are limited, that promise is meant to prevent a vacuum, because in a vacuum, rumor becomes oxygen. In the same day, independent institutions speak. Leading observatories publish their findings. Major universities post preliminary analysis. Engineering groups explain what can and cannot be faked. Some of these statements are cautious, some are blunt. Together, they build a kind of distributed legitimacy. The public begins to accept it. Not everyone, but enough. And acceptance brings a new emotion: grief. Not grief for a person, grief for a worldview that felt stable. Many people realized they had quietly believed humanity was alone at the top of its story. Now that story has changed. The change is not only scientific, it is personal. Day 3 brings the first signs of psychological strain at scale. Sleep patterns shift, news consumption spikes. Some people cannot stop refreshing feeds. Others cannot bear to look. Clinics report more stress-related complaints. Hotlines see a rise in calls. Employers notice drops in focus. Workplaces feel strange. People show up, but they do not fully arrive. Meetings start with practical tasks, then drift into speculation, then end with someone saying, We should get back to work. But the mind keeps pulling back. Hospitals and emergency services quietly plan for staff burnout, because the public is not the only group under stress. Critical workers feel it too. They have to keep functioning while carrying the same uncertainty. Day 4 is when the scammers arrive in force. Fake cures, fake protective devices, fake investments in alien tech, fake insider briefings, deepfake videos of leaders announcing disasters. The scam messages are tuned to different audiences. Some are religious, some are technical, some are political. Governments respond with arrests and warnings. Platforms respond with removals and labels. But not everything can be removed. Much of it moves through private channels. This becomes one of the first lasting lessons. In a world where reality is fragile, authenticity becomes infrastructure. Day 5 is when religious and philosophical responses become organized. Major faith leaders issue statements. Some emphasize that contact does not negate faith. Some emphasize humility. Some warn against idolatry. Some interpret the visitors through existing spiritual frameworks. In many communities, gatherings increase because people seek comfort. In other places, gatherings decrease because people are glued to screens. New groups appear. Some are harmless. Some are dangerous. Some claim the visitors are angels. Some claim they are demons. Some claim they are future humans. Some claim they are simply other minds. People do what people always do. They use stories to make the unknown feel shaped. Day 6 is when security services shift posture. Air defenses move to higher alert. Nuclear forces move into cautious monitoring states. Some submarines change routes. Some satellites are retasked. Cyber defense teams move to full emergency coverage. Not because the visitors are hacking, at least not obviously. Because humans are. State actors try to steal each other's data. Criminal groups exploit fear. Hacktivists attack symbols. The internet becomes a battlefield of belief. Day 7 ends the first week with a second message. It is structured and layered. It is designed for minds that understand mathematics. It contains repeated patterns that act like keys. It contains references to universal constants to help establish meaning. It contains a short statement that most translators agree is an introduction and a request. It asks for a stable channel. It asks for patience. It states that contact will be slow. It warns about destabilization, not as a threat, as a diagnosis. By week 2, the joint panel is working around the clock. Its makeup looks unusual, but it makes sense. Astrophysicists and radio astronomers, computer scientists and cryptographers, linguists and semiotic experts, psychologists and trauma specialists, diplomats, military officers, public communications experts. Because contact is not only about decoding a signal, it is about steering a species through shock. Week 2 also brings the first major economic adjustment. Insurers begin rewriting terms. Business interruption coverage is debated. Some companies seek new riders. Some insurers refuse. Shipping firms alter routes, not because the oceans are threatened, but because port delays can grow when security protocols tighten. Airports add procedures for anomalous sightings. Aviation authorities issue guidance to pilots. Central banks coordinate liquidity measures to prevent panic withdrawals. They extend lines between institutions. They reassure depositors. In some places, governments promise temporary guarantees. The goal is simple: prevent a human-caused collapse. Week 3 brings a strange social change. The sky becomes a shared object of attention. Astronomy apps surge in downloads. Telescopes sell out. People stand outside at night, not because they expect to see a craft, but because they want to feel connected to the bigger context. Some people feel awe, some feel dread, some feel both. Week 3 also brings a new kind of public debate. How much should we know? Some demand total transparency. They argue that hiding information is a greater danger than the information itself. Others demand restraint. They argue that sudden information can trigger panic and that adversaries can weaponize what is released. Most governments choose staged disclosure, regular updates, limited details, promises of more later. Week 4 brings the first controlled demonstration, a scheduled event. An object enters the upper atmosphere at a time announced in advance. It is tracked by multiple radar networks. It is seen by civilian cameras. It does not land in a city. It stays distant, as if the visitors do not want to be surrounded. It performs maneuvers that do not fit conventional aircraft. Then it leaves. The demonstration is like a signature. We can arrive. We can depart. We are not asking permission, but we are not attacking. After the demonstration, the panel releases a cautious translation of the earlier message. The translation is not presented as perfect. It is presented as best current interpretation. It includes a claim that the visitors are a civilization, not a single vessel. It includes a statement that they will not integrate suddenly. It includes a request for a protected exchange site. It includes warnings about sudden knowledge. The protected site request triggers the first major geopolitical crisis. Who hosts the site? If one nation hosts it, others suspect secret deals. If it is placed in international territory, security is complicated. If it is placed in orbit, engineering becomes difficult. After tense negotiation, a compromise emerges. A remote zone under shared oversight, guarded, monitored, and designed to reduce crowd pressure. Multiple nations contribute personnel. Multiple nations contribute sensors. A public-facing oversight committee is created, with limited but real access. The first months after contact are defined by a hard trade-off. Openness builds trust. Secrecy protects security. No society gets the balance perfect. In some places, secrecy dominates. In others, openness dominates. In most, the balance shifts back and forth as events unfold. Month 2 is when politics begins to rearrange. Some leaders gain popularity simply by sounding calm. Others lose popularity by sounding erratic. Some parties split internally, with factions arguing over cooperation versus isolation. Some elections become referendums on contact policy. New words enter speeches: humanity, Earth, species. Month 2 is also when the first wave of international coordination begins. A special session is called at global institutions. It is part sincere, part performance. Every country wants to be seen as responsible. Every leader wants to be seen as protective. Smaller countries demand not to be ignored. They argue, correctly, that the outcome will affect everyone. Out of this comes a contact council. It is not a world government. It has no police force, but it becomes a coordination hub. It establishes working groups, communications, science, public health, security and risk, economic stability, legal and ethical frameworks. Month 3 is when mental health strain becomes visible in numbers. Anxiety diagnoses rise, insomnia rises, substance use rises in some populations. So does therapy use. So do self-help communities. People seek grounding. Public health agencies publish guidance about doom scrolling and sleep hygiene. It sounds almost silly in the shadow of cosmic news, but it matters. A society that cannot sleep is a society that cannot think. Month 3 also brings the first wave of interpersonal conflict. Some families split over belief. One person trusts institutions, another believes everything is a lie. Some people accuse others of being naive. Some accuse others of being brainwashed. Friendships strain. Work teams strain. In a few places, the strain spills into public violence, not widespread war, localized clashes, protests that become riots, attacks by extremists who claim they are defending humanity, tragic incidents by groups convinced the end is near. Governments respond with increased monitoring of high-risk groups. Civil liberties debates intensify. People argue over what is protection and what is overreach. Month 4 brings the first deep scientific exchange. A data package arrives. It is layered. The outer layer contains concepts humans can test safely. Improved models of plasma behavior, better methods for shielding against radiation, new ways to detect certain phenomena at distance, some biological information about the visitors, but not enough to be used as a weapon, instructions for building a stronger communication channel. Scientists test what they can. They publish what they can. Security agencies classify what they fear. A public fight erupts. Should everything be open? The argument becomes practical. If the new sensing method is public, astronomers benefit. But so do militaries. If it is secret, perhaps war risk is reduced. But public trust collapses. A compromise emerges. Some details are released. Some are held. Both sides are angry. That is often how real compromises look. Month 5 brings a black market, not for alien devices, which remain rare, for recordings, documents, insider accounts. Some are real, many are fake. Forgeries improve. Media outlets build verification desks. Governments publish digitally signed releases. The public slowly learns to demand provenance. It becomes normal to ask not only what happened, but how do we know? Month 6 brings the first face-to-face contact. It happens at the protected site. It is not broadcast live. A limited recording is released after. The meeting is brief. The visitors arrive with protective measures. They keep distance. They communicate through prepared channels. Their appearance is described in careful terms. They are not human, but they are not myth. They have biology. They have limits. They show caution. The released content emphasizes slow steps, exchange, and boundaries. They do not offer unlimited help. They do not promise to solve human conflict. They do not demand worship. They do not claim ownership. They present contact as a long process. By the end of the first year, the world begins to settle into a tense but workable routine. But the routine has new layers. Regular briefings, regular scientific releases, regular protests, regular markets, regular life. This is one of the strange truths of human nature. We normalize, even the unbelievable, but the normalization is not evenly distributed. In stable societies with strong institutions, daily life steadies faster. In fragile societies, contact stress magnifies existing cracks. Corruption becomes more dangerous. Rumors become more explosive. Economic shocks hit harder. This unevenness becomes a major humanitarian concern. Aid agencies prepare for contact-linked instability. They plan food distribution. They plan medicine supply. They plan conflict de-escalation. Sometimes they succeed. Sometimes they arrive too late. In the first year, education changes. Teachers must answer questions they were never trained for. Some do it poorly. Many do it with care. Curricula add space science. They add critical thinking. They add lessons about uncertainty and verification. Schools develop protocols for handling misinformation among students. Libraries set up public sessions with scientists. Museums create exhibits about the detection and confirmation process. The message is repeated again and again. We confirm this through method, not through rumor. This repetition is not only educational, it is psychological. It gives the mind something solid to hold. In the first year, the workplace changes. Some companies become more authoritarian, tightening control, fearing instability. Others become more flexible, giving staff time, recognizing the stress. Hiring shifts. Demand rises for cybersecurity, for satellite data analysis, for language and pattern recognition, for mental health services, for physical security. Some industries shrink, luxury goods, certain entertainment segments, some travel sectors. Not because travel stops, but because spending priorities shift. At the same time, other entertainment grows. People seek comfort. Long-form content rises. Calm narration rises. Guided sleep content rises. Humans try to soothe themselves. The first year also changes the law. Governments pass emergency regulations around drones near sensitive areas. They tighten penalties for price gouging. They tighten rules for mass misinformation campaigns. Courts become involved. Free speech debates intensify. Some measures are justified. Some are abused. The argument becomes complicated. Because in this era, misinformation is not just political. It can be existential. It can be violent. But the cure for misinformation can also be dangerous. Month by month, a new kind of policy language becomes common. Civilizational resilience. This includes supply chains, mental health, media literacy, critical infrastructure, trust. In the second year, the diplomatic question becomes sharper. Who speaks for Earth? The United Nations is not a world government. Large states do not want to surrender influence. Small states fear being ignored. A contact council forms with regional representation, rotating seats, and scientific leadership. It has limited authority, but it becomes the public face of coordination. Behind it, nations keep their own channels. This creates suspicion, but it reflects reality. Humanity is not a single mind. In the second year, the visitors request more structured exchange. They propose standards for messages, time windows, signal formatting, error correction. They discourage emotional broadcasting. They encourage measured exchange. This frustrates the public. People want a moment, a handshake, a public speech, a dramatic scene. But the visitors do not join human theatre. Or if they do it sparingly. They act like a cautious explorer meeting a new coastal tribe. They do not step into the crowd. They do not allow large, uncontrolled groups near them. They keep distance. They keep safety. This shapes the psychology of the era. Many people interpret caution as superiority. Others interpret it as simple prudence. The truth may be practical. Any small misunderstanding could cause violence, and violence could escalate. The second year also changes economics. Risk premiums remain elevated. Insurance costs remain high. Some investment shifts towards stable governance. Some shifts into safe assets. Some shifts into long horizon science. The phrase long horizon becomes common because contact forces planners to think in decades, not quarters. Some governments create sovereign funds specifically to handle contact-related investment. They fund research. They fund education. They fund space infrastructure. They claim the goal is national readiness. But the effect is also political. Who controls the funds, controls influence. This creates internal battles. Ministries compete, agencies compete, scientists lobby, defense officials lobby. In some places, corruption follows, because money follows fear. In the second year, there is also a social backlash. Some people reject contact completely. They form movements that demand isolation. They argue that any exchange is contamination. They argue that the visitors will change culture. They argue that the risk is too high. These movements gain votes in some places. In other places, internationalist movements gain votes. They argue that cooperation reduces risk. They argue that secrecy creates danger. They argue that humanity must act together. The political map becomes less about left and right, and more about open and closed. In the third year, security policy becomes more formal. Space becomes more strategic, not only for satellites, but for observation. Nations invest in more space-based sensors. They invest in space traffic monitoring. They invest in rapid launch. They invest in redundancy. Some build backup communication systems. Some build hardened data centers. Some diversify undersea cable routes. The goal is to survive instability, because the biggest immediate threat is not the visitors. It is human conflict triggered by uncertainty. In the third year, the visitors provide more information, but still not everything. They share methods for safer communication. They share limited biological knowledge. They share limited physics concepts. Humans share cultural data, history, art, basic language structures, social patterns, conflict history. The sharing is delicate. Both sides fear misunderstanding. Humans worry about manipulation. Visitors worry about violence. A slow trust forms through repeated small exchanges, joint observation projects, controlled experiments, shared standards for signaling. In the third year, scientists begin to realize that the visitors may not think like humans, not just in culture, in cognition. Their time sense may differ. Their social structure may differ. Their concept of individuality may differ. This becomes a major research area, not to judge, to reduce misinterpretation. Because the most dangerous thing in contact is not malice, it is assumption. In the fourth year, a new field matures, contact ethics. It sounds abstract, but it becomes practical. How should humans share information? What consent means in cross-species interaction? What it means to preserve cultural autonomy? How to avoid turning the visitors into a tool for human propaganda? How to avoid scapegoating groups blamed for collaboration? This field influences policy. Not always, but sometimes. In the fourth year, there is also a deeper cultural shift. Art changes. Not only science fiction, music and painting and poetry, themes of distance, themes of humility, themes of the night sky as a living place. Some people become more spiritual. Some become more skeptical. Some become more curious. In many places, the change is quiet, a subtle lowering of human arrogance, a subtle increase in the sense of shared fate. In the fifth year, a major technological breakthrough influenced by visitor data becomes practical. Not a starship, a power system improvement, a materials advance, a better way to manage high-energy plasmas, a better way to convert power with less waste. Whatever it is reproducible, and once it is reproducible, it spreads. This begins to change energy markets. Fossil fuel producers face decline. Some pivot, some resist. Energy-rich states face pressure. In some, instability grows. This becomes one of the most important geopolitical effects, because energy is power. As energy changes, alliances change. conflicts shift. At the same time, cheaper clean energy reduces some tensions. It makes desalination cheaper. It stabilizes agriculture in some regions. It reduces resource pressure. But it also increases capacity for surveillance and advanced weapons. The dual-use problem never goes away. In the 6th year, the public attention is no longer constant. The shock is gone. The fact remains. People still work. They still fall in love. They still grieve. They still argue about mundane politics. And in the background, humanity keeps a channel open to another mind. A generation grows up with contact as a given. For them, it is not a revelation. It is a condition of the world. This shifts ambition. More students choose physics. More choose engineering. More choose diplomacy. More choose ethics. Not because they expect to meet a visitor tomorrow, because they live in a world where such meetings are possible. In the 7th year, a scandal breaks. It is revealed that some governments knew more than they admitted early on, or that corporations gained privileged access, or that accidents occurred and were hidden. Public trust is damaged. Protests rise. Investigations follow. Reforms are proposed. This is another human constant. Even in the shadow of contact, secrecy persists. But because the contact process is real and ongoing, the scandal does not end it. Instead, institutions mature. More oversight, more transparency, better verification. Slowly, the structures around contact become more stable. As the years continue, the aftermath becomes less about emergency response and more about long-term shaping. One of the biggest long-term shifts is in how societies handle uncertainty. Before contact, uncertainty was often treated like a flaw. People wanted leaders to sound sure. They wanted news to feel final. They wanted problems to have clean answers. After contact, it becomes obvious that some things remain unknown for a long time. Even with the best data, that does not make facts meaningless. It makes process more important. So new public habits grow slowly and unevenly. Some communities become more careful with evidence. They learn to ask, what is the source? What is the method? What is the chain of custody? They learn to accept that a responsible person can say, we do not know yet. Other communities become more extreme. They reject uncertainty and chase certainty in the form of rigid stories. They lock into the idea that the visitors are saviors or invaders or a test or a deception. The story becomes an identity. Governments notice this split. They begin to treat social cohesion like national security, not only with surveillance, with education, with public health, with community programs, because a society that tears itself apart is easy to destabilize. In year 2 and 3, many countries build permanent contact response offices, not the early emergency teams, permanent offices with budgets, staff, training, legal authority. They work with science agencies and with security agencies. They also work with public health, because the psychological load remains. Some people never fully adapt. They live in a constant state of dread. Others live in constant anticipation. Both can be unhealthy. So mental health systems expand. Teletherapy grows. Community clinics get more funding. Workplaces normalize mental health support. And some places do it better than others. A major long-term effect appears in the economy of attention. For a year or two, contact dominates the feed. But over time, people cannot sustain that intensity. They begin to compartmentalize. They check contact updates at certain times. They return to local life. This is not denial. It is survival. Media companies adapt. They create dedicated contact desks. They build relationships with scientific panels. They create formats that mix explanation with calm tone. Some of these are responsible. Some become sensational. The competition for clicks never disappears. It simply changes its subject. Technology companies face a new demand: proof of authenticity. They implement stronger verification for major public figures. They support cryptographic signing of official media. They invest in deepfake detection. They also invest in deepfake generation. Because the same tools that detect can also create. This leads to a new arms race, not between nations, between truth and imitation. Schools respond by teaching media literacy earlier. Children learn how to check sources, how to compare outlets, how to recognize manipulation. Some education systems embrace this, others resist it, because teaching critical thinking can threaten fragile political control. So the world remains uneven. Geopolitically, the biggest shift is not a single treaty. It is a slow reweighting of alliances. Some alliances strengthen because shared monitoring and shared scientific work make sense. Some alliances weaken because member states disagree on openness and secrecy. The question becomes, who can be trusted with sensitive contact information? That question is not only about the visitors, it is about rival humans. In some regions, long-standing conflicts cool slightly because leaders fear escalation under the new context. In other regions, conflicts intensify because states see contact as a chance to gain advantage. A new category of arms race develops: sensor race. Nations compete to build better space-based and ground-based detection. They compete to understand anomalies faster. They compete to control the story. This leads to more satellites, more radar arrays, more undersea listening systems, more high-altitude platforms. The world becomes more observed. That has benefits: faster disaster response, better weather modeling, better tracking of wildfires. But it also increases surveillance, and surveillance has political consequences. Economically, the years after contact create two opposing forces. One is caution. Investors demand higher risk premiums. Insurance remains expensive. Some projects are delayed. The other is ambition. Some investors and governments decide that the only sensible move is to invest in long-term capability. They fund research and development. They fund energy. They fund space. They fund education. This creates a new global competition, not only for weapons, for talent, engineers, physicists, linguists, biologists, diplomats, psychologists. Countries create new visa programs to attract them. Universities offer scholarships. Companies offer high salaries. Brain drain accelerates. Some nations benefit, some suffer. This creates resentment, and resentment creates political instability. So international organizations attempt to balance. They fund labs in under-resourced regions. They build training programs. They share open data sets. Again, imperfect, but real. One of the most important long-term debates is about cultural exposure. What should the visitors see of humanity? What should humanity see of the visitors? Some argue for openness. Share art, share music, share stories, humanize ourselves. Others argue for caution. Do not reveal weakness. Do not reveal internal division. Do not reveal strategic vulnerabilities. The truth is that humans cannot hide their nature completely, not in the age of the internet. So the debate becomes less about hiding and more about choosing what to emphasize. Some nations promote a narrative of unity. Some promote a narrative of strength. Some promote a narrative of humility. These narratives are partly for the visitors, but also for their own citizens, because people want to feel that their group has a role. Psychologically, one of the strangest long-term effects is the change in how people imagine death. Before contact, many people assumed that if humanity ended, there would be no one left to care. After contact, the universe feels populated. That can be comforting, or it can be frightening. Some people feel newly motivated to preserve humanity. Others feel newly insignificant. Both reactions show up in therapy rooms. Both show up in art. Both show up in politics. Religions adapt in different ways. Some integrate the visitors into their theology. Some treat contact as a test. Some emphasize stewardship of life. Some react with fear and rejection. New sects appear. A few become dangerous. Governments monitor them, not because belief is illegal, but because mass harm is possible. Public health agencies develop protocols for cult risk and mass panic, similar to how they handle other forms of social contagion. In the scientific world, the biggest change is not a single breakthrough. It is the focus. Research becomes mission-driven. The questions become clearer. How do we communicate safely? How do we detect and interpret signals? How do we model non-human cognition? How do we ensure that new knowledge does not cause accidental catastrophe? Funding flows into basic physics, but also into boring engineering, materials, power electronics, radiation shielding, signal processing, secure computing. These areas do not make headlines, but they build capability. Over time, some visitor-influenced advances become practical. Better sensors, better shielding, better power conversion, improved medical imaging, incremental but meaningful improvements. The public often feels disappointed at first. They expected miracles. They get progress, but progress compounds. 10% improvements stacked across systems can reshape a civilization. Security planners worry about one thing constantly: accidental escalation, a human fighter jet flying too close, a missile test misread as an attack, a radar glitch interpreted as hostile movement, a political leader making a theatrical threat. To reduce this, nations build new hotlines, not only between each other, between the Contact Council and national militaries, between sensor networks. They create standardized incident reporting. They create joint investigation teams. Because if an incident happens, speed and clarity matter. In parallel, legal systems evolve. International law has to address new questions: protected zones, jurisdiction, liability for accidents, rules for handling artifacts, rules for controlling dangerous information. Some lawyers become unexpectedly important. They draft frameworks that try to balance openness, security, and human rights. The debate is constant. If you classify too much, you breed distrust. If you reveal too much, you may enable harm. The best systems aim for layered disclosure. Publish methods, publish summaries, publish timelines. Hold back only what creates direct vulnerability, and even then, explain why. Over time, the public begins to accept a hard truth. There is no perfect safety, only better process. In the long view, the most important effects are not the dramatic moments. They are the subtle ones. A city council meeting that now includes, once a month, a report on contact preparedness, the same way it once included hurricane preparedness. A hospital that stores extra critical supplies, not because of an alien threat, but because panic taught them what shortages feel like. A shipping company that keeps a little more inventory in multiple ports, trading efficiency for stability, a family that makes a rule at dinner, no more than 10 minutes of contact news, because their children need normal life, a teacher who adds one simple habit to every assignment: show your sources, explain your reasoning, not to punish, to build a mind that can hold uncertainty. In many places, the first contact era pushes society to learn the difference between fear and caution. Fear is a storm. Caution is a plan. Caution is boring. And boring is often what keeps people alive. The Contact Council, over time, becomes less dramatic and more administrative. It sets standards. It audits protocols. It reviews incidents. It negotiates small exchanges. It trains representatives. It builds continuity so that a change in political leadership does not erase process. This is one of the hidden dangers of the early years. Election cycles. A new leader can undo agreements. A new leader can chase glory. So diplomats and civil servants work quietly to build institutions that outlast personalities. Some countries do this well, others do not. And when they do not, the cost appears as social strain. The visitors in this scenario remain consistent in one way. They do not rush. They do not flood humanity with information. They do not respond to every emotional outburst. They keep to schedules. They keep to standards. They respond to stable channels. This frustrates the parts of humanity that crave spectacle, but it rewards the parts of humanity that can be patient. Over time, this shapes culture. Patience becomes a virtue again. Not the passive kind, the active kind. The kind that keeps working while waiting. The kind that holds a long project without needing daily fireworks. This begins to change politics slowly. Some voters start to value steadiness. Some still value anger. The two compete. In some places, demagogues still rise. They claim they can force the visitors to give more. They claim they can push the other nations into obedience. They claim they can win a cosmic negotiation through sheer will. Sometimes they gain power. When they do, the system strains. Scientists resign. Diplomats warn. Markets wobble. And then the public learns another lesson. Reality does not bend to loudness. The visitors do not respond to threats the way humans do. They respond to capability and predictability. So the loud leaders either change or they fail. In the years after contact, one persistent challenge is the problem of leaks. Sensitive information leaks. Sometimes for money, sometimes for ideology, sometimes because a person thinks the public deserves to know. Leaks can be healthy. They can reveal abuse. They can force transparency. But leaks can also be harmful. They can expose individuals. They can reveal security layouts. They can trigger panic. So governments and media organizations build more mature leak handling. They verify. They redact. They coordinate. The goal becomes to publish what the public needs, without creating avoidable danger. Meanwhile, ordinary people adapt in their own ways. Some become more community-minded. They build local mutual aid groups. They share supplies. They check on neighbors. They form discussion circles that focus on calm processing rather than argument. Others withdraw. They avoid crowds. They reduce news intake. They focus on family. Some become hypervigilant. They buy equipment. They join militias. They train. This last response is one of the risks, because armed fear can create its own disasters. Governments respond with a mix of enforcement and outreach. They crack down on violent groups. They also try to reduce fear through clear communication. They run public drills that focus on practical steps, not alien invasion fantasies. Practical steps: where to get verified information, how to avoid scams, how to care for mental health, how to support critical infrastructure. These campaigns seem simple, but they shape behavior, and behavior is what decides whether a society stays stable. As the years pass, a final long-term effect becomes clear. Humans begin to see themselves as a single, fragile system. Not all humans, not all the time, but more than before. Climate and contact begin to merge in public imagination. If humanity is going to be part of a wider neighborhood, people ask, what kind of homeworld are we keeping? This does not instantly solve environmental policy, but it adds pressure, it adds shame, it adds motivation. It also adds a new rhetorical weapon. Some leaders use the visitors as an argument for unity. Others use them as an argument for control. The future remains contested. And yet, in the quiet, the subtle changes keep building. A child learning to handle uncertainty without panic. A community learning to resist scapegoating. A journalist learning to demand provenance. A scientist learning patience. A leader learning to speak carefully, knowing a mistake could echo across the planet. A child learning to handle uncertainty without panic. A community learning to resist scapegoating. A journalist learning to demand provenance. A scientist learning patience. A leader learning to speak carefully, knowing a mistake could echo across the planet. First contact does not replace human responsibility. It does not solve human problems. It does not erase cruelty. It does not erase kindness. It expands the stage. And on that stage, humanity still has to choose what kind of species it will be. In quiet homes at night, when the news is off and the phones are down, people sit with a new background feeling. Not constant fear, not constant hope, a quiet awe. The recognition that the night sky is not only a backdrop, it is a neighborhood. And from that point on, every human story carries, somewhere in the distance, the presence of another mind. And now, when the long story has been told, it can help to zoom back in to the smallest scale. Because first contact is not only policy, it is also breakfast. It is parents waking up early and deciding whether to talk about it today, or to let their children have one more normal morning. It is a commuter on a train, watching a stranger cry quietly, and deciding whether to offer a kind word. It is a nurse doing an extra shift because the hospital is short-staffed, and because people still get sick even when the universe gets bigger. It is a cashier dealing with a stressed customer and trying not to take the fear personally. It is a teacher standing in front of a classroom and saying, "I do not have all the answers, but we can learn how to ask better questions." Over time, small customs emerge. Some families create a weekly check-in ritual where they talk about what news felt scary, what felt hopeful, and what felt confusing. Some workplaces begin meetings with a quick grounding moment, not as a trend, but because leaders learned that calm is productive. Some neighborhoods host quiet public talks with scientists and counselors, not to sensationalize, but to help people process. Some cities establish local resilience plans that include contact-related rumor control, scam prevention, and mental health support. None of these are dramatic, but they are how a society stays intact. In the long aftermath, the largest risk is not that the visitors arrive with weapons. It is that humans, overwhelmed, start to treat each other as enemies. So the most valuable work becomes social, building trust. building shared facts, building routines, building compassion that is practical, not performative. This is also where economics becomes personal. In the early months, many people feel powerless watching markets swing. But over time, households adapt. They reduce debt. They save a little more. They keep some emergency supplies. They learn that resilience is not panic hoarding. It is preparation without fear. Governments, if they are wise, learn the same. They invest in redundancy. They harden power grids. They fund public health. They secure water systems. They update emergency communication. They treat truth as a public good. They do not always do this, but where they do, life improves. Where they do not, instability grows. In the years after contact, another subtle shift appears in how humans think about achievement. Before, some people measured success mainly by money, status, and competition. After, many still do, but a growing number begin to value contribution, skills, craft, service, knowledge. Because a larger universe makes shallow status feel smaller. Not for everyone, but for enough people to change culture. Young people begin to ask new questions. What do we want humanity to be known for? What do we want to preserve? What do we want to change? Some of these questions are used as propaganda. Some are sincere. Sincere questions can still matter. In science, the long aftermath creates patience and humility. Researchers learn that even with new clues, many problems remain hard. Some areas accelerate: sensors, computation, materials, energy conversion. But biology remains complex. Psychology remains complex. Politics remains complex. So the myth of instant progress fades. What replaces it is a quieter truth. Civilizations are built. They are not downloaded. In diplomacy, the long aftermath builds a new kind of professionalism. Representatives train for contact the way astronauts train for space. They learn controlled language. They learn to manage their own emotions. They learn to avoid projecting human intentions. They learn to listen for structure. They learn to work with teams. Because a single careless statement can become a global crisis. In security, the long aftermath builds a new kind of discipline. Rules of engagement become strict. Accident reporting becomes standardized. Sensor anomalies are investigated with mixed teams to reduce bias. Military leaders learn that bravado is dangerous. They learn that restraint can be strength. Not always, but more than before. And still, even in the calm, the mind returns to the basic human questions. What are they? What do they want? Are they like us? Are they better than us? Are we safe? The answer, for a long time, remains mixed. Some things become clearer. Some remain unknown. And the presence of unknowns becomes a permanent part of the human condition. That is not new. Humans have always lived with unknowns. We simply had smaller ones. Now the unknown is bigger, but the daily tools for living with it are the same. Sleep, food, friendship, work, honest talk, quiet wonder. And when the news feels too large and the sky feels too deep, the best thing a person can do is return to what is close. A warm light, a familiar room, a steady breath, a gentle story. There is one more thread in the aftermath that deserves a slow look. The question of technology and inequality. When any powerful new knowledge enters the human world, it never spreads evenly. Some places have universities. Some have stable power grids. Some have trustworthy institutions. Some have money. And some have none of these. So even if the visitors try to be fair, humans will not be. In the first years, contact-related research clusters in countries that already lead in science. The labs that can interpret data are not everywhere. The factories that can produce advanced materials are not everywhere. The compute clusters that can model new physics are not everywhere. This creates a new kind of global tension. Countries that feel left out accuse others of hoarding. Some are correct. Some are using the accusation to justify their own power grabs. The Contact Council attempts to create access programs, open datasets where safe, shared training, international labs, scholarships, partnerships. But every program runs into the same friction: trust. A country does not want to share sensitive knowledge with a rival. A leader does not want to appear weak. A military does not want to lose advantage. So progress happens, but slowly. Inside countries, inequality grows in its own way. Some workers benefit. Scientists and engineers gain opportunities. Mental health professionals see demand. Cybersecurity and verification experts gain influence. Other workers feel ignored. They watch money flow into labs while their rent rises. They watch politicians speak about the future while their local schools struggle. This creates resentment, and resentment is fuel. Some political movements use it. They say the contact era is only for elites. They say ordinary people will pay the cost, while others take the benefits. Sometimes they exaggerate. Sometimes they are describing something real. Wise leaders respond by investing locally. They rebuild infrastructure. They fund education. They support community health. They make resilience visible. They show that the future is not only a laboratory, it is also a safe street, a working clinic, a stable job, a school that teaches children how to think. Unwise leaders respond with blame. They blame immigrants. They blame minorities. They blame scientists. They blame other nations. In the contact era, that kind of blame is especially dangerous because it can turn a global shock into local violence. This is why the psychological aftermath and the economic aftermath are tied together. A person who feels secure can process awe. A person who feels desperate often cannot. So the long aftermath becomes a test of governance, not only of diplomacy, of basic competence. Can a state deliver food? Can it deliver water? Can it keep hospitals running? Can it keep the grid stable? Can it tell the truth? Can it admit uncertainty without losing legitimacy? This, more than anything, is what separates societies that steady themselves from societies that fracture. And even in fractured places, people still try. Neighbors help neighbors. Teachers keep teaching. Nurses keep nursing. Engineers keep repairing what breaks. There is a quiet heroism in that, not a cinematic heroism. The daily kind. The kind that carries a civilization through a long, strange era. If the visitors are watching, this may be what matters most. Not our speeches, not our weapons, not our pride, our ability to keep care alive under pressure. And so, slowly, the story settles. A larger universe, a still human world, a long road of learning, and, in the quiet, a breath. There is also the question of psychology at scale, the way whole populations think and feel together. In the first months, people do not only experience fear and awe, they experience loss of control, a sudden reminder that humanity is not the top of the ladder. For some, that is humiliating. For others, it is freeing. And for many, it is simply confusing. Public health agencies begin to treat this as a form of collective stress. They publish guidance for families, keep routines, limit constant news, sleep, eat, move your body, talk to trusted people. These are simple steps, but in a crisis, simple steps are anchors. Therapists report common themes: nightmares about the sky, obsessive checking of feeds, arguments about what is real, a feeling of smallness, a sudden fear of leaving home, and also a sudden hunger to connect, to join groups, to talk, to not be alone with the thought. Governments and community leaders learn a lesson that disaster planners already know. If you want people to stay calm, give them a role, not a dramatic role, a practical role. Teach people how to spot scams, how to share verified information, how to support vulnerable neighbors, how to donate blood, how to keep schools stable, how to reduce panic buying. When people feel useful, fear becomes manageable. When people feel useless, fear becomes a storm. Over time, societies that build these roles do better. Their streets stay calmer, their hospitals cope better, their politics stays less extreme. Societies that do not build these roles tend to fracture. They chase scapegoats. They swing between denial and panic. They fall into conspiracy and counter-conspiracy. This is not because their people are worse. It is because their institutions fail to hold the stress. So the long aftermath becomes, in a quiet way, a study in basic human needs: safety, belonging, meaning, truth that can be trusted, a future that feels possible. And when those needs are supported, humanity does what it has always done. It adapts, it learns, it keeps living, even under a larger sky. And there is one more practical layer that often gets overlooked: language. Not only the language used to speak to the visitors, the language humans use to speak to each other. In the early days, officials learn quickly that certain words cause panic, invasion, war, doom. They also learn that certain words cause false comfort: safe, guaranteed, nothing to worry about. So communication becomes a craft. Leaders are trained to say what is known, to say what is unknown, to say what is being done, and to say what the public can do. This style spreads beyond government. School principals use it, hospital administrators use it, company leaders use it. Even families begin to adopt it. What do we know? What do we not know? What can we do today? This turns out to be one of the most stabilizing habits of the contact era. Because it reduces the mind's need to invent answers. It gives people a way to hold reality without collapsing. In time, this habit also changes how societies discuss other crises: storms, pandemics, economic shocks. The contact era trains communication muscles. Again, unevenly. Some places learn. Some places resist. Some places keep using fear as a tool. But enough learn that a broader shift happens. A culture that can speak clearly about uncertainty is harder to manipulate. It is also kinder, because it stops treating ignorance as shame. It treats it as a stage in learning. And so, the story we are telling tonight is not only about visitors, it is about the human ability to keep building meaning, to keep building order, to keep building care, in a world that suddenly feels bigger. And as the day ends, and the mind seeks rest, it can be enough to remember this. The universe can be vast, and still a single quiet life can matter. A single calm choice can matter. A single truthful sentence can matter. A single act of care can matter. If you imagine the first contact era from far away, it can look like a single turning point, but living through it feels more like weather. Some days are clear. Some days are stormy. Some days are strangely quiet. People get used to this rhythm. There is an update. There is reaction. There is argument. There is adaptation. Then, slowly, there is routine again. And when routine returns, it does not mean nothing changed. It means the change became part of life. A generation grows up with the knowledge that the sky has neighbors. They do not carry the same shock. They carry curiosity. They carry responsibility. They ask how to build a world worth representing, how to keep a planet healthy, how to keep institutions honest, how to keep science open but safe, how to keep compassion alive under pressure. Those questions are not answered in a year. They are answered over decades. And that is why the visitors, if they are wise, take slow steps. Because the real contact is not a meeting. It is a long relationship. And relationships are built in small moments, in patience, in clarity, in repair after mistakes, in the steady work of learning each other's limits. So, tonight, we let the story settle into that long view, a world that continues, a species that adapts, a sky that feels wider, and a quiet place to rest. And if the mind starts to race with what-ifs, it can help to remember the simplest grounding truth. Most of life still happens at human scale. A kettle boiling, a door closing, a streetlight turning on, a friend texting to check in, a parent tucking in a child, a quiet moment before sleep. The contact era does not erase these small anchors. In some ways, it makes them more precious, because when the universe feels large, the close and familiar becomes a refuge. So we end the story there, not in the sky, but in a calm room, with a steady breath and the gentle permission to rest. Tomorrow, the world will keep moving. People will go to work. They will repair roads. They will deliver food. They will teach lessons. They will treat patients. They will write code. They will plant seeds. They will argue about politics. They will laugh. They will worry. And behind it all, the larger truth will remain. Humanity is not alone. That truth will not always feel comforting. But it does not have to be terrifying either. It can be simply real, a fact the mind can hold, a fact that invites humility, a fact that invites care, and in the quiet, it can invite sleep. So the long aftermath is not one event. It is many. 100 small choices repeated, 1,000 quiet adjustments, a slow building of new institutions, a slow building of new habits, a slow building of a language that can hold uncertainty, and if humanity is lucky, a slow building of wisdom. Not perfect wisdom, just enough. Enough to stay steady, enough to stay kind, enough to keep learning, enough to keep living. And if any part of the mind still asks for a final answer, a perfect conclusion, it can rest with this. The contact era does not end. It becomes context, a new background to the human story, a wider horizon behind ordinary days. And with that horizon behind us, we can still do the same old human work. Be honest, be careful, be brave in small ways, and let the night be quiet. So we leave it there, a slow unfolding, a careful world, a patient exchange, a human future still being written one day at a time. And now, a quiet pause. The room is quiet. The sky is wide. And the story can rest. This was a quiet archive story, where the story ends, sleep begins,